It's very risky. They don't want to take the risk of coming to Nigeria to build a refinery. So we had to actually do that. And you can also imagine that we brought in 150,000 containers. And majority of them we had to go through Lomé.
Hi guys, welcome to Gift of Raps, where we showcase Africa's innovation and tell inspiring stories of powerful entrepreneurs. In today's episode, I'm showing you a video where Dangote spoke about how he built Africa's largest refinery. So you just sit back, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy the video.
It is an honor to be here to speak about a topic that holds the key to transforming Africa's industrial trajectory, building an African refinery hub. Let me begin by framing the context. Africa produces approximately 7 million barrels of crude per day, though we consume only about 4.3 million barrels of petroleum products per day. And quite troubling, we refine just about 40% of that domestically. Most of this production is in Algeria, Egypt, and now Nigeria, with the start of the Dangote Refinery. In sub-Saharan Africa, we don't have more than 3 good working refineries. To compare Europe and Asia, they refine about 95% of their consumption. So while we produce plenty of crude, we still import about 120 million tons, and effectively exporting jobs and importing poverty into our continent. That's about $90 billion of market opportunity being captured by regions with surplus refining capacities. To put this in perspective, only about 15% of African countries actually have GDP greater than $90 billion. We are effectively handing over an entire continent's economic potentials to others year after year. Now, I must clarify, I'm not against global trade. On the contrary, I believe in the power of free markets and international collaborations. But trade should be rooted in the principles of economic efficiency, comparative advantage, and a fair playing field. And it defies logic and economic sense for Africa to be exporting raw crude only to re-import refined products. Products we are now more than capable of producing ourselves, closer to both source and consumption. So why is this happening? Why have we not been able to refine our own petroleum products at scale? Based on our experience building the Dangote Refinery, the largest single-train refinery in the world, we encountered 3 broad categories of challenges, which is technical, commercial, and textual. So let me walk you through each one of them. The technical challenges, let me begin with this one. Let no one underestimate the complexity of building a world-class refinery anywhere in the world. As a matter of fact, we have one single equipment that weighs 3,000 tons, which is the first of that kind of equipment to land in the soil of Africa. These are among the most capital-intensive and logically complex industrial facility ever built. To construct ours, we were actually the EPC contractors. We had to take the charge to be the EPC contractors because we couldn't get any EPC contractor that agreed to come and take this risk. They say Africa is very risky. They don't want to take the risk of coming to Nigeria to build a refinery. So we had to actually do that. We bought over 2,700, we created a company and also bought over 2,700 hectares of land, which is 7 times the size of Victoria Island, of which 70% of it was actually swamp. So we had to debush the land. Based on the data on climate change, we had to raise the line by about 1.5 meters. So we pumped 65 million cubic meters of sand from the sea. We installed over 250,000 piles of 35 meters each. Anything that you see in our refinery is standing on pipe. Millions of meters of piping, cabling, electrical wiring, and so on. One prominent company, which I shall not name, supplied us with faulty equipment, which I believe was intentional. The equipment was actually quite critical to the startup of the refinery, and without that, we couldn't have started the refinery. And that it took us 2 years to correct the various defects of commissioning that unit. And that actually reminds me of when we bought the refineries of Port Harcourt and Kaduna in 2007. The government took it back, and they are still not yet there. At peak, we had total of about 67,000 people working at site, of which 50% of them are Nigerians. So coordinating around the clock across hundreds of disciplines of nationalities. Then, of course, we now came through COVID, of which actually set us back about 2 years. But I think we must be thankful to the government, because despite the COVID, China and India, based on the written note by the president then, may so rest in peace, they allowed us to operate and allow us to charter planes and bring in people to continue. So, but we continue at a very lower phase. But we persevered. We built not only the refinery, but also a seaport, because the existing port capacities in Nigeria couldn't actually handle over 60% of our equipment. And you can also imagine that we brought in 150,000 containers. And majority of them we had to go through Lome and keep bringing them in. We also had over 2,600 of heavy equipment in the construction company, over 1,000 vehicles, and 330 cranes of 100 tons and above. We even actually built the world's largest granite quarry, because nobody could supply us with the quarry, which is about 10 million tons. But most of the hurdle actually, was assisted through the cooperation by NMDPRA to assist in terms of accelerating the construction. After overcoming the technical challenges, we faced the second major hurdle, which is commercial viability. Once the refinery was ready, we now proceeded to line up working capital to commence operations. Exchange rates has gone up from $156 at inception of the project to $1,600 at completion. The interest rates were exorbitant, but we had no choice. We appreciate all the local and the international banks by standing with us. They really stood by us, and they have done very well. One of the first commercial shocks we came with was crude feedstock sourcing. At the project inception, it was reasonable to assume that in a country producing about 2 million barrels per day, securing crude would be least of our worries. But we were wrong. Rather than buying crude oil directly from the Nigerian producers at competitive terms, we found ourselves having to negotiate with international trading companies who are buying Nigerian crude and reselling it to us with hefty premiums. Of course, as we speak today, we buy about 9 to 10 million barrels of crude monthly from the United States and other countries. I must thank the NNPC for making some cargoes of Nigerian crude available to us from the start to date. They've done very well. But it's been very, very difficult with the IOCs. IOCs have been the most difficult in our journey. Even after securing the crude, transporting it became another bottleneck. Lifting schedules were constantly shifted by upstream operators, and we were hit with excessive port and regulatory charges. skyrocketing port charges made about 40% of the total freight cost, meaning it costs 2/3 as much as chartering a vessel, with the crew, insurance, and fuel included.
This is where we draw the curtain on today's edition. For the full speech, watch the next video.
Welcome to the stage where dreams ignite. Gift unravels here to shine a light. Entrepreneurs and talent that inspire. Trailblazers who reach higher and higher. Give them life.